Welcome back. As we continue on with the conversations this morning, a third-party candidate in Nigeria's tightly contested presidential election has caused a major upset by winning its in the biggest city in Lagos, which resulted, from the state elections officials shows. Now, the Labour Party's Peter Obi narrowly defeated the ruling party's Bola Tinubu in his heartland, they say. Nigeria's Electoral Commission has started announcing state-by-state results from the national elections on Sunday. More than 87 million people were eligible to take part, making it the biggest democratic exercise in Africa. With more on this, I'm now joined by Dr. Florence Masajua, Professor of Law and current Dean of the Faculty of Law at Edo State University in Nigeria. A very good morning, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
How are you this morning?
Oh, very good. I'm fine.
All
Very
right.
fine.
All right. Now, Professor, talk to us. What are your latest, what is your impressions on the ongoing Nigerian elections?
This election is a watershed. The elections that are so far been conducted since 1999, when this fourth, what we call here, the Fourth Republic, kind of started. Now it's a watershed in that this was the very first time out of the series of several elections that have been conducted so far in the course of this Fourth Republic that I said started in 1999. In that, this is the first time the youths came out in droves to register to be part of the electioneering, management in Nigeria. So at the end of the registration exercise towards this election, INEC released a figure that showed the majority of the new registrants were mostly youths who hitherto showed so much apathy in the elections in Nigeria. But this time around, what we experienced is a very, very different ballgame from what has been happening when the elections were conducted first in 1999, 2003, 2007, 2011, 2015, 2019. So it's a very remarkable election, and we're happy for it.
All right.
The
Now that
turnout, especially of the youths.
All right. Now, Professor, there are delays in getting the results of the elections. What is causing the delay?
So many things. Now, from the logistic part of it, at least I voted. The election officials from INEC, you know what INEC means? That's the Independent Election Commission of Nigeria, arrived late in various polling units or wards where these elections were, to be conducted. For instance, the announcement put out there by the Election Commission is to the effect that elections will start at the various wards of polling units 8:30 a.m. Nigerian time. And most of the centers, sadly, the election materials and the officials didn't show up until maybe about 10, 11 a.m. And in some very bad cases, you had them coming in as late as 1 p.m. or even 3 p.m. Certainly, and whereas the law says, or the announcement there says, the election will start by 8:30 a.m. and end by 2:30 p.m. So you can imagine centers where they arrived late, how far the election will go, considering the time constraint already. And then an inquiry showed that part of the reason is transportation problem. Most of them didn't have the kind of transport that would take them effectively to the centers where they will conduct these elections. That's as per the officials of the Independent National Election Commission. Now, that's one. Two, the availability of materials. One of the centers I voted or I monitored, I think Ward 10 or so, the election materials were incomplete. And the voters there, kind of rejected all entreaties that they should go ahead and manage whatever materials that have been brought. So these and so many other things might have been responsible. Then, of course, too, you talk about the technology side of it, the beavers that were promised is going to work. Then the beavers were test run in some other regional elections that were held in Osun, in Ekiti, in Edo State, here where I am, and in Anambra State. But sadly, at the national level, when, of course, it became a national issue, it appears the beavers failed in some places in uploading results, especially the presidential results. And so this is also a very serious constraint, as it were,
Right.
given the kind of praises showered on the efficacy or effectiveness of the beavers, as it were, in the conduct of these other regional elections I mentioned earlier. Whereas at this more general election now, it failed woefully. And this must have been part of the reason why there is delay so far in the releasing of the final results, as it were.
All right. Does Professor perhaps know how many state figures have been released at this point?
Yes, at last night, before INEC officials went on break or adjourned to resume later today by 11 a.m., about 11 state results have been released. About 11 state results. I don't have a list of those states now, but about 11 of them, including Lagos, Ekiti. Ekiti was the first to be released. And then far there in the north, states like Gombe, and some a few states, yeah,
No.
yeah, Benue and Plateau State, and some other states in the southeast too, especially in Enugu State. Those results have been released. Altogether, about 11 states were released as at yesterday.
All
So
right.
we're expecting more states to be released today when INEC really resumes collation by 11 a.m. this morning.
All right. Now, Professor, I mentioned earlier that a third-party candidate in Nigeria tightly contested the presidential elections, has caused a major upset by winning in the biggest city, which is Lagos. Now, and are we seeing a possible political shift coming to Nigeria?
Yes, you see what's happening is a result of the upsurge in the registration by youths. I see last 2 years, yeah, especially during the COVID, pandemic, as it were, there was some protests by the youths here about the obnoxious way the police and some other military men carry out their activities, especially against the citizens, civilians. And so that protest were mostly conducted or carried out by youths. And then the youths, the way the protest ended, they were a bit dissatisfied with the outcome. Now, these same youths now thought the best way, especially when the government told them, if you are not happy with whatever is happening in the government, the best way to show your grouse is to maybe mobilize, get registered, and participate in the electoral process. And the youth responded. And consequently, that led to upsurge in the registration of voters for the 2023 election. And that upsurge is what we are seeing happening in Lagos. Because the bulk of these youths are milling around the new entrant you said, Peter Obi and his Labour Party. They see in Peter Obi the new face of the Nigerian, for the Nigerian that understands the presidential candidate and party that seem to understand their needs, understand their challenges and whatever. And then they milled around him, they surrounded Obi, and they started a movement today known as obedient movement. And it was basically the obedient movement that led to the revolution of a result in the ongoing election in Nigeria. They are seen in Lagos. The bulk of the voters there were these youths, or not necessarily the youths per se, but other people, other Nigerians who had never shown keen interest in the electoral process. They came together, they mobilized and mobilized around the obedient movement, and consequently decided one of the remarkable things they would do, the upstaging will be the upstaging of whatever hegemony or hegemonic interest that have held Lagos from 1999 when democracy, the Fourth Republic, kickstarted to the present day. And they felt the only way to do that was to dismantle that hegemony. And that's what we are seeing happening. The obedient movement did that.
All
And
right.
especially the youth who are coming into the electoral process more or less for the very first time.
All right. Now, Professor, we understand that a candidate needs to have the most votes and a quota of ballot casts in 25 of the 36 states, plus Abuja, to be declared the winner. Are we likely to see this happening?
From the results yesterday, the 11 states that results have been released, obvious, none of the 3 or 4 candidates, have shown remarkable pass mark, permit my use of that word, that would give the impression that one of them is out for an outright victory on the first round, as it were. So we think, well, or maybe it's too early. I don't know if it's too early to say, well, this time around, we might just be running to runoff, which has never happened in the electoral history of Nigeria. It's a bit too early now, but at the same time, from what is happening, if we are to talk against the backdrop of these 11 states results that have been released, certainly we seem to be heading to that. And it's also pointer. If ever we head to that, we will not be surprised, because it's also part of what I said earlier, the fact of the new movement, the youths, the awakening of the youths and other Nigerians who were never interested in the electoral process coming up and kind of showing remarkable interest this time around and aiming earnestly to take charge of the Nigerian affairs, which hitherto they had never shown interest, and which they are feeling, because their lack of interest has been what exactly has led to whatever level of poor governance each and every one of them seem to have issues with. So it's all part of it. We are looking forward to that happening if the picture remains what it is today, just 11 states and none of the contenders, the 4 major political parties, presidential candidate, showing remarkable pass mark or pass level, maybe that will give them an edge over and above the other contenders.
All right. Now, Professor, just lastly, before we let you go, if you could perhaps just touch on some of the changes that you would like to see.
Well, I would have loved a situation where it would have been a free and fair election that is marred by some of the very heart-rending things we hear about, violence here and there, disenfranchising some people. Some of the polling units we heard election didn't take place, and the appear results have been declared, to the consternation of voters who registered in those centers. And then, of course, to the technology deployed, we are giving the impression the election chairman, Professor Mahmoud, told us before this election, and one of the party agents even said for as many times as 80 times, assured Nigerians that the technology, the BIVA specifically, will work effectively this time around, that the internet facilities, they are collaborating with the network providers to ensure that internet services will not in any way disrupt the sending deployment of results to the central server where the results will be collected and ultimately released to the public. Then we are looking forward to all these things working, the promises of the public relation officer of Independent National Electoral Commission about 180 something times, as reeled out to by some of the party agents, that promises to the effect that technology will be used effectively,
Thank you,
and
Professor.
consequently there'll be minimum. Okay, there'll be minimum of disruption to the electoral process. But what we are seeing so far appears to be disheartening. We hope they'll be able to put their acts together, and the rest of the results coming in, hopefully, would prove whatever pundits, whatever negative thoughts people are having presently about
Thank
the
you so
results
much,
released so far.
Professor. Professor, unfortunately, that's all the time we had for you this morning. Thank you so much for talking to us
Thank you.
and also just for that update on what's happening.
Oh,
All right.
thank you so much. My greeting to my Namibian families, especially the Eunice, Petrina, and immigration. My greetings to them. I miss all of you. I loved Vinduk. I loved University of Namibia where I schooled. God bless Namibians and God bless Nigeria too.
All
Have
right.
a
God,
nice day.
God bless Nigeria too. Thank you so much. That was Dr. Florence Masajua, who is the Professor of Law and the current Dean of the Faculty of Law at the Edo State University in Nigeria, giving us an update there on the elections and also some of the changes she wants to see. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, Lot brings you the news.